Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the virtual classroom. And this is the part two of the discussion on understanding statistics. For today, we're going to have the methods of data collection. So, as I've mentioned, one way to collect data is through census. So, this collects measurements from the entire population, or this is used when the population is small. Example, determining the average grade on statistics exam, measure salaries of all the 50 state governors, and of course, we also define sampling. Choose a sample from your population and collect measurement from the sample. So we use sampling when the population is very large. Okay, so that's why we get the sample. Example of this is opinion on polls, determining the average income in the Philippines. Okay, then we have experiment. So this is the number three ways to collect data. So collect a sample, split the sample into two groups. So we have the experimental group, which receives the treatment, and of course the control group. So this is used to measure the effect of treatment by comparing the characteristics of the case and of course the control groups. Example, a sample of 200 cancer patients is selected. An experimental drug is given to 100 patients and the remaining 100 patients receive a placebo. So the survival rates of the two groups are then compared. So that's an example of experiment. Okay. So we have basic types of sampling. So definitely that is the non-probability sampling and probability sampling. Usually, ang non-probability sampling ay ginagamit ito sa qualitative research. Okay, so what is non-probability sampling? This is arbitrary, non-random, and is generally subjective. So data gatherers choose sample cases as they wish or wherever they find them. While probability sampling naman, this is based on the concept of random selection, a procedure that assures that all elements in the populations are given an equal chance of being selected as sample unit. So usually naman, ang probability sampling ay ginagamit ito sa quantitative research. So types of sampling methods in illustration, so say for example, samples. So non-probability sample, we have judgment, non-probability chunk quota, meron pa dyan yung tinatawag na referral system, yung snowball, and a lot more. Pwede din dyan ang purposive sampling. Okay, so that's under non-probability samples. While probability samples naman, simple random, we have systematic, stratified, and cluster sampling method. So definitely, uh, there there are differences when it comes to non-probability and probability sampling method. Okay? So why do we need to study a sample? So bakit hindi nilang buong population? So definitely, kung kukuha tayo ng sample, it is more cheaper, it is faster, and it is more accurate because it is computed and meron yung mga formula, and it can yield more comprehensive information. Anyway, sa quantitative naman, meron namang ina-allow na error or margin of error. So while for the non-probability sampling, this is usually a judgmental sampling. It does not provide every member of the population an equal chance of being selected as part of the sample. So, the chance of an element to be chosen as a sample is unknown. So, ano din to, prone din ito sa bias. So, a bias is the greater probability of certain type or class of sample to be included in the selected sample. And of course, the conclusion derived from a non-probability sample is limited to the sample itself. So, kaya mas gusto nila yung probability sampling. Under non-probability, we have accidental sampling. Then we have purposive sampling. For example, sa accidental sampling, For example, an investigator who wants to interview 25 students about their study habits may stand at the door of a classroom and interview the first 25 students who enter the room. If better, students tend to enter the classroom earlier than the slower students. So the bias in favor of the brighter student is introduced. Sa accidental yan. While purposive sampling, ito meron na tong pre-selected criteria na kasi ito. So for instance, a researcher wants to know how grandparents feel about their grandchildren. So he may select men and women who are 65 years old and above who have grandchildren to serve as respondents. So if there are younger grandfathers in the population, they cannot be included in the study. So pag purposive sampling, meron na siyang certain characteristics. Probability sampling technique. So there are several ways of drawing probability samples. Ang five most common technique is simple random, then systematic sampling with random start, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and multi-stage sampling. The most common here is simple random sampling, yung fishbowl method, yung binubunot. O kaya naman, sa systematic naman ay yung binibigyan siya ng specific number in a certain order. Halimbawa, every third person will be the sample. Okay? So, sa simple random sampling, every individual or item from the target frame has equal chance of being selected. So, selections may be with replacement or without replacement. And one may use table of random numbers for obtaining samples. Bakit sinabi ito na um, everybody has an equal chance? Pwede kasing ilagay lahat ng pangalan sa isang bowl, yung fishbowl method, tapos bubunutin. So, lahat kayo pwedeng maging respondents. Okay? At pwedeng palitan yung respondents. So, here is the example. Say, for example, you want to study the extent of participation in local government among 24 barangay captains and municipality in Tagbilaran, Bohol, and you want to draw a random sample of 10 officials. A decision has been made to choose the sample without replacement. It is also assumed that the target population is homogeneous. In regard to a number of characteristics, sampling may be done by draw lots or by using a table of random numbers. So here, example population is 24 barangay captains, sampling frame, a list of the 24 barangay captains, sampling unit is the barangay captain. So what are you going to do here? Step 1, make a list of the barangay captains and give them corresponding number from 01 to 25. Assuming that the names of the barangay captains are the alphabets, list the name of the barangay captains and give their corresponding number. So ngayon, sa step 2, lalagyan natin siya ng number sa small piece of paper and roll it. After writing all 25 numbers, place the rolled pieces of paper in a container. So shake the container and pick one piece of paper at a time until you had picked 10. So for example, ang nakuha is 3, 7, 13, 25, 17, 21, 5, 6, 12, and 20. Then the sample barangay captains are C, G, M, Y, Q, U, E, F, R, and T. So, kung mas maganda, ilagay na lang yung pangalan and then i-draw lot siya. So, ito ang tawag dito is fishbowl method. Then we have systematic sampling. Ang systematic naman is decide on sample size n. So, we divide the population of individuals into groups of k individuals. So, randomly select one individual from the first group, select every k individual thereafter. So, n is 64, n is 8, so k is 8. So, every 8 person will be the sample. Or you get 8 people in the given population. Say, for example, here, for a study on the knowledge and practices of farmers regarding the use of pesticides in the province of Iloilo. So suppose you wish to draw a sample of 15 farmers from 30 eligible respondents. So these 30 were identified from a list of farming cooperative members. So what are the steps in getting the sample farmers? I-list muna yung 30 eligible farmers in alphabetical order. Lagyan sila ng numbers 1 to 30. And then step 2, determine the sampling interval by dividing the size of the population by the number of units desired. So, say for example, ang units desired ko is 15. So, 30 divided by 15 is equal to 2. So, then you select at a random start by picking a random any number from 0 to 30. For example, you pick 10, then start at number 10. Okay, so from number 10, then the random starts, take every second name in the list. So you reach number 30, so go back to number 1 and continue drawing your sample. So from 10, so 12, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. Then balik sa number 1, so 10, 4, 6, are, of course, they are the sample farmers. So since you have to get 15, okay, desired number of population. Stratified, stratified sampling naman, populations divided by into two or more groups according to some common characteristics. So simple random samples selected from each, so the two or more samples are combined into one. Okay, so that is stratified random sampling. So for example, in a study on attitudes of farmers towards land reform, so the study populations consist of 75 farmers, 30 rice farmers, 20 sugarcane farmers, 10 vegetable growers, and 15 cut flower growers. If the attitude towards land reform of the four groups are expected to differ, a sample from each group must be drawn. So population, all the 75 farmers. Ang sampling frame natin is list of farmers by type. So madami siya by sugarcane farmers, vegetable farmers, and etc. So sampling unit natin is farmers. So what's the first thing that you're going to do? Classify muna the 75 farmers. So rice farmers, so merong 30 population. Sugar farmers, merong 20. Vegetable growers, 10. Cut flower producers, 15. So total, we have 75 farmers. So para makuha natin ang sample size sa bawat type of farmer, so kunin natin yung proportion or sampling fraction. So 30 divided by 75 times 30, that is 12. So ibig sabihin, kukuha tayo ng sample na 12 sa rice farmers. So the same is true, 20 divided by 75 times 30, so 8. 10 divided by 75 times 30 is 4. 15 divided by 75, that is 6. So, if you're going to look at the sample size now, na kinuha natin, so take note of the sample fraction. So, 12. So, total sample is 30. Okay? So, yan. So, yan ang kukunin natin. 12 sa rice farmers, 8 sa sugar farmers, 4 sa vegetable growers, and 6 sa cut flower producers. So with this subsample size determined, select the sample from the stratum using the simple random sampling or yung tinatawag natin na systematic sampling. So babalik tayo doon sa draw lots. Okay? And of course, we have the cluster sampling method. So population divided by into several clusters. So each representative of the population. So a random sample of clusters is taken. So all individuals or items in each selected clusters are being studied. Okay, so these are the cluster, is the illustration. Okay. So example, consider the study attitudes towards dishonesty and dishonest practices among employees in municipal LGUs in the province. So the employees may be divided into two heterogeneous groups or classes or clusters. So each with 10 individuals or a total of 100 employees. So if the desired sample size is 50 employees, so 5 sample clusters need to be drawn at random. So ito yung clusters. So 10 clusters. So frame list of 10 cluster groups. For sampling unit, one group cluster with 10 members. So the first one is to number the 10 groups consecutively with 1 to 10. Using simple random sampling, draw 5 numbers in each cluster. So 2, 6, 5, 9 are chosen. So ayan. So identify the groups represented by the numbers drawn. So ito yung mga clusters. So 2, 6, 5, 9, and 1. So study all the employees in the 5 sample clusters. So cluster muna sila, then nag-assign ng numbers, and then binuno. So yung cluster na yon, yun ang magiging respondents or sample. Okay? So, determination of sample size, the most common is the Slobin's formula. So, consideration determining the sample size. So, paano nga ba makukuha ang number ng sample? Usually, we use the Slobin's formula and other formulas in finding the sample size. So, type of the survey first, variables or data items to be estimated, availability of resources, degree of accuracy or tolerable error of the estimate, and availability of the sampling frame, and of course, estimated population size. These are all considerations in determining the sample size. So, usually, ito yung sample size determination for categorical survey variable with a very large but unknown population size. So, n is equal to z squared pq divided by d squared. So, ano yung n? N is the desired sample. C is the standard normal deviate, usually set as 1.96, which corresponds to the 95% level of confidence. So, 1.96 usually yan. And P is the proportion in the target population estimated to have a particular characteristic. So, if there's no reasonable estimate, then use 50%, usually 0.5. And Q is 1.0 minus P. And D is the margin of error, usually set at either 0.05, 0.02, or 0.01. So example, if you want to determine the sample size of a study in which the population is over 10,000, and if the proportion of a target population with a certain characteristics is 0.50, and if the level of confidence you want to use is 95%, or the C statistics is 1.96, and you desire an accuracy level of 0.05, then the sample size is computed as, so substitute. So of course, we have the Z, which is 1.96 squared, 1 minus 0.5, and then 0.5 divided by 0.05 raised to the second power. So by computing, so your sample size is 384. Okay? So sample size determination for categorical survey variable with known population size. So alam ang population size. So ito yung formula niya. So there are several formulas pala in finding the sample. And this is the most common. This is the Slobin's formula also. Kasi sa ibang book, n is equal to n over 1 plus n e squared. Yung d is the margin of error. So ito, n over n d squared plus 1 siya. So n is population, the bigger n. And the small n is the desired sample size. D is the margin of error. Sa ibang formula, n yan all over. Yung n dito, n yung d is e, means error, raised to the second power plus 1. And of course, the margin of error pwedeng 0.05, 0.25, or 0.1. Okay? So, that ends our discussion for understanding statistics until finding the sample size. So, thank you so much for listening. So, hope to see you next virtual meeting. Bye, everyone.